Hi everyone, Lisa and Dan here from Fireside Strategic. We're on a mission to help business leaders achieve great results through human-centered strategy. In the Fireside Chat series, we're showcasing how leaders unite strategic and human thinking in leadership, and more broadly, are transcending the challenges of COVID-19. It's Tech Week, and today we're chatting with Alex Capecelatro, founder and CEO of Josh.ai. Alex, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I didn't realize it was Tech Week. That's kind of fun.
Yeah, it is pretty fun. We've talked to a few other people in the tech space, even a person that does AI as well. So you're part of the club now.
Nice.
So Alex, could you tell us a little bit more about yourself? A little bit about your journey?
Yeah, do you want to know sort of where I am now, where I got started? Where should I begin?
Oh, what a great question. Honestly, we want to know the whole thing. Why don't we start a little bit with where you are now and what is Josh.ai to just provide the viewers with a little bit of context. And then we can dive into your kind of journey of how you got here.
Sounds great. So yeah, Josh.ai is a smart home voice-controlled startup that we began about 5 years ago. Just announced a few weeks ago, closed an $11 million funding round, brought us up to 22 million total. But the company is really focused on making really simple to use but powerful systems for the smart home. And so an example with Josh would be you could walk in the room and say, Josh, turn on the lights, open the shades, and play some music. And Josh will control everything in that room. It'll figure out the right music to play based on your experiences, your background. And one of the most important things is we're super privacy focused. So everything that we do, unlike the big mass market players, stays in the home, doesn't go to the cloud. You're not going to get, ads based on your conversations. So it's really more sort of a premium service for the smart home.
That's so cool. I love the differentiation of really caring about people's security. That is one of consumers' main concerns with using smart home systems in general these days.
Definitely. And one thing that might be relevant for people watching, we've had a lot of, friends and various folks ask over the years, how do you compete with Amazon and Google, the biggest companies out there? And really what we found is by focusing on a niche, for us, it's these sort of more complicated environments where you do care about privacy. And in fact, by creating a business where we're not selling your data, we even have a model where we can explain why our product will cost more. Because let's be honest, Amazon, Google products for the voice assistants are almost free. They cost so little. And it's hard for a startup to make a profitable business doing that. And we just say out of the gate, look, if you want, the potential of the cloud advertisements and data and who knows what's going to happen to your commands, like go with that stuff. That's fine. But if you want a secure, privacy-focused platform, you will pay a little bit more, but it's to secure your data to make sure that no one else is listening. And so it's been great. 5 years in, I wouldn't have necessarily expected things to go as well as they did, but it really doesn't feel like Amazon, Google, Apple, these giant players are a threat. But we can kind of dive in more a little bit later. It's a lot about, we just really focus on one specific vertical that we can do better than anyone else, rather than trying to do, everything.
Perfect. Yeah, I'm very, very curious about the story of how you got here, but just because you mentioned, I don't want to disrupt your flow, what is that specific vertical?
Yeah, so where we focus is essentially in the projects that are complicated enough that you need a professional installer. Typically, these would be residences that are larger, 5,000 to 10,000 square feet and up, where you could have hundreds of connected devices, security systems, surround sound, whole home audio. There's a lot of complexity that you're not going to be able to install on your own. And it turns out that when a professional is installing it, you need to build specific tools that make it easy for them to both support, but also remote diagnose in case anything goes wrong. And there's a whole sort of different set of features that are needed when the product is being installed professionally. But the great thing for us is the professionally installed smart home is very similar to the professionally installed senior assisted living center, hotel rooms, retreat centers, and even offices when you think about having a professional that comes in and sets stuff up. And you just don't see the mass market consumer companies really getting into that space. They're direct to consumer. So for us, by going after a vertical that's more B2B, it's allowed us to really create some interesting defenses.
Makes total sense. And did you know from the beginning that there was going to be a lot of overlap between sort of the higher value portion of the market and an interest in protecting privacy, or is that more of a happy accident?
That's definitely a happy accident. For us, we always knew that we needed to secure data. We never wanted this to be a play where we would sell the voice commands or do anything, targeting ads. But we didn't realize how important it would be both to the consumer, but also how negative it's been to the big mass market companies. We see headlines all the time about, what's happening with my Alexa commands, who's really listening, where's that data going? And as much as those companies make great products, they kind of created this opportunity for us because more and more we just hear people say, I love the idea of voice control, but I don't trust putting that into my home.
Right. Makes total sense. Always important to diminish people's fears. So I think that's a great introduction to Josh.ai, but we'd also love to do a nice introduction to Alex Capecelatro. How did you get here? How on earth did you become founder of an in-home AI company?
Yeah, it's been kind of a crazy journey. I'm debating right now if I start at the beginning or kind of start at the end. And just for fun, I'll start at the end and kind of work backwards a little bit. So this company got founded as I was renovating a home that was, we wanted to make this smart. We didn't really know what that meant. This was 5 years ago. And I just found the options on the market to be a little underwhelming. Most smart home products traditionally have been very expensive, and really don't offer the cutting edge, AI, machine learning, and software that I've really come to love and that I've spent my career creating. While I was building and renovating my home, my current business partner was doing the same thing in Denver. And we were just having conversations about what thermostats you putting in, what lighting system, what music system. And as we were going through this, we just kept saying, why isn't this better? Why isn't this easier? And it was very clear that we had a problem and a pain point for ourselves. But we just started chatting with friends and we started asking different people, hey, you've got a really cool home. What did you put, what did you install? And are you happy with it? And we got a perfect 100%. Everyone we spoke with was dissatisfied in one way or another, which, is a good indicator that maybe there's a good business opportunity. The next thing we did is we really looked at the size of the market. And at the end of the day, the smart home market is growing year over year. But even where it was 5 years ago, it was a multi-billion-dollar market. And when you have that much revenue potential and that much unhappiness, I equate it similar to what Uber did in the taxi industry. Billions of dollars were being spent on taxis, yet no one was happy. So this made a lot of sense for us. But in terms of kind of working our way backwards, I'm the co-founder CEO. Tim's our CTO, yet we're both very technical. Tim is definitely more of the engineer. He built a software company. Tim's quite a bit older than I am. I built a software company in the 80s and 90s that sold for $500 million, did very well with that. But he really just loves programming. And so his idea of retirement when he sold that company was just to write code for fun projects. And that's when I got to know him. He was kind of working on the voice engine behind Josh, just as Tony Stark building Jarvis style, just kind of wealthy guy having fun. On the other hand, I was building a startup that was really focused on machine learning recommendations. We had a beautiful app interface. I've always been very user focused and user experience focused. And I got to know Tim as I was building that company, and we just really kind of bonded. My background though is going back back into middle school days. Built a website when we were still running GeoCities. This was kind of even early AOL days. And that website, as things kind of grew, we moved it off GeoCities, became the #1 BMX website for extreme bicycling. I was in middle school. I did it with my brother. We had worldwide users. I mean, this was early days of the internet, early 90s, but it was just so amazing that we would stay up all night with a new feature. We'd ship it in the morning and then have dozens, if not hundreds of people immediately sending in feedback and telling us, that they liked it. And that power of the internet really kind of was captivating early on. But I took a really weird detour. What happened was I like making things. I like creating things. As I was doing this website, at one point I started a magazine, then a t-shirt company, then an actual bike company. I was making handlebars, bike frames, seat posts. And this was kind of early high school. And I just like making stuff. For me, it's really fun to have a vision, have an idea of what the sort of consumer market would want, and just try to make it happen. And as I was getting into that, I was really getting more into the kind of science and physics of the hardware. This was way different than building websites. When you're making physical parts, you have to get material, you have to deal with cost of production, and then the engineering. You have to make sure it's strong and safe, and how do you ship it? There are a lot of interesting things you learn. And I was getting really interested in sort of the physics, the engineering, and the chemistry behind what was going on. And one thing led to another. I started just doing these odd chemistry experiments. I naturally reach out to folks. I'm a big networker, which I highly recommend to everyone. Cold call, you get no reply 9 out of 10 times, but the one that replies could change everything. And so in my case, I ended up getting a summer job at a university in a chemistry lab, which led to me ending up at a chemistry conference, which ended up me meeting some folks in DC who I got to finance some of my work. I was 16 at the time. And that year I ended up dropping out of high school, moved down to DC, and spent the next 6 years working for the government. And so I ended up working for 2 different NASA divisions. In DC, I was at the Naval Research Lab. I moved to New Mexico for a bit, working at the Sandia National Lab, and really was just having fun creating. I was working in electrical engineering labs, bioengineering labs, doing a lot with nanotechnology. And this was exciting because it was really cutting edge research, working with super smart people. But after doing this for enough years, I realized I couldn't really talk about the work I was doing. It was all funded by the DOE and the DOD, Department of Energy and Department of Defense. I kind of missed the website days when I was able to push features and have people immediately use it. And instead, I'm working on these top secret applications that probably will never be commercialized, or if not, or if they do, it'll take a long time. And so one thing led to another, and I was kind of sketching out an idea for a biotech business of sorts when I connected with some folks in Los Angeles that had similar ideas. And I basically ended up enrolling at UCLA, kind of made college my excuse to sort of transition my career. Started going to college and working on this biotech company. The biotech company ended up being a huge disaster. Really learned a lot about what not to do in starting a business. But in doing so, we now had transpired. Web 2.0 had really come. Facebook had emerged. Google had transformed. And as the biotech project was really kind of wrapping up, which was about 2.5 years of my life, mind you, while I was in school, I just started getting back into software. And I realized that things had changed dramatically from the early GeoCities days to what was going on, it's sort of Web 2.0. And so I just started writing code, hacking the other projects, getting a group of friends that were doing similar things. But I wasn't really ready to make that transition away from hardcore science because I'd spent so many years in these research labs. And so while I was building websites for fun, I ended up, and again, networking. I just like to reach out to people, consulting with SpaceX for a little bit because they were local in Los Angeles. I met some guys that were early days working on an electric car. I ended up joining them full time. That became Fisker Automotive. If you guys don't know, Fisker company raised over $1 billion, kind of a crazy startup. I was there when there were about 12 people. We scaled to 1,000 people within the first year that I was full time. I did somehow end up graduating college, which was funny because I dropped out of high school, but did go through 4 years of college. And coming out of college, I ended up joining Fisker full time, and it was a wild ride. I learned a lot, and again, it was sort of this balance of I did a lot with software, did a lot with hardware, and did a lot with research. As I was there, it was kind of clear that this was just not operating as I would have wanted. I like to move fast. I like to hack together stuff. I like to to try to really change industries. And even though it was an electric vehicle, the company was doing a lot of things in a very traditional way. We hired 1,000 people from Detroit to build a car, much like we had always built cars. And there's a reason that Tesla is still around today and Fisker isn't. I think ultimately the company, so what happened was I left, company fired the CEO a year later, filed for bankruptcy a year after that, and actually did end up getting acquired by some new investors and is back up and running, however, as a very different business today. But when I ended up leaving, what I found was I don't think at the end of the day I'm really good at working for other people. I like to be able to call the shots. I like to know that if a decision is made that's not the right decision, ultimately it's on me rather than having anyone else to blame. And so while I was at Fisker feeling a little bit just sort of frustrated, I just started hacking together the software project on the side just for fun. It was never meant to be a company. But as I started moving it further and further along, I realized there were things I couldn't do. I needed deeper back-end engineering support. I needed design support. I started just reaching out to friends I knew and just said, hey, I've got this problem. I'm curious if you might be able to help me. And before I knew it, I had a full-time job, but I had a group of 5 people working basically on the side for me, nights and weekends for free, helping me with this project. And again, networking is a big part of my journey. I talk to people, I meet people, I reach out to people. I ended up meeting this local investor that really kind of believed in the vision of this project I was working on. And he said, look, if you want to go full time, I'm happy to write the first check. Like, let's turn this into a company. And that was important for me. I don't know that I would have made that plunge without that, but David just sort of gave me that confidence of let's give this a try. Like, let's do this. And so I quit working at Fisker. I had a PhD student at Caltech and a design student from Art Center, basically 2 top schools in the Southern California area. I'd gone to UCLA, so I had a group of UCLA engineering students that were helping out, sort of on the side. And I spent 5 years building this business that, like I said, involved a lot of machine learning, recommendation engine stuff, great user interfaces, user design. Ultimately, it was a business that I would consider it a failure from the perspective of I had this grand vision that it never achieved. That said, in the 5 years, learned a lot, got a lot of recognition, ended up selling the company. And when it came time to selling the company, I was at a really interesting transition. I was at one level just a little bit burnt out on doing things the way that we had done things. And to give some context, this was a business that, much like a lot of these social consumer apps, had a lot of users. Therefore, it was 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, but no revenue. And so I was just relying on raising capital after capital, and it was, always pitching investors. And if you're Snapchat or TikTok, that works because you have crazy user adoption. At the end of the day, if you have tens of thousands of users, it's not enough. And that's a hard place to be because with tens of thousands of daily active users, there's a lot of excitement. You have a lot of feedback. You have a lot of people saying they love what you're doing, but it's not a viable business. And so when I was coming out of that, I basically wrote up a postmortem where I said, not necessarily for that business, but for myself as an entrepreneur, next time around, there are 3 core things I want to do different. The first one is I want to have a co-founder. The way that business started, I had these great people that were with me from the beginning, but not as co-founders. And in that 5-year journey, we had lawsuits, we had ups, we had downs, we had all sorts of stuff. And not having a co-founder was one of the things that I really sort of learned I wanted in the business. The second thing was, without having a co-founder, I also never really had a CTO. I mentioned I'm technical. I mentioned I like to hack stuff together. I don't consider myself a CTO, at least not at the level that Tim is right now. And I said, I really want to have, if not in the co-founder, someone that's very much a CTO to help really work through some of the complicated aspects of scaling and building these types of products. At the end of the day, I like being on the design side. I like really focusing on the user experience, but the how to make that come together is not my strong suit. And I learned that about myself. So, lesson 2 is having a really strong technical either co-founder or CTO. It doesn't have to be the same person. And then the third thing was a lot of products today and businesses really are building really, really cool solutions without really innovating. And what I mean by that is you look at something like even Uber. Uber's innovating on the user experience side, but they didn't really have to invent new core technology to make that work. And I look at my background in research and electric cars and the stuff I had done, that was something I missed. I really wanted to be more of an inventor, have a company that was really inventing stuff that had never been invented before. And those were kind of the three things. Oh, sorry. The fourth thing, the most important, I wanted a revenue model. I wanted to have income from the beginning. I was tired of trying to build these Silicon Valley style companies where TechCrunch is writing about us and all these outside metrics seem great. But at the end of the day, how do you pay your employees? And so I said, next time around, I want there to be a clear revenue model as fast as possible. And if people are willing to pay for what I'm doing, then there's proof that there's value. And so that kind of led to Tim and I chatting, talking about doing this business together. And what was kind of fun was Tim is both my co-founder and my CTO. He filled, those two voids. Our product, we've built hardware, which is, a very separate, different thing if you've never built hardware. But we've got lots of patents, lots of intellectual property. It really is a company inventing. And we made it, very clear. We started the company in March of 2015. And that same calendar year, we collected our first revenue. We thought it was important that we got revenue coming in that first year just to prove that what we were doing, people valued enough to actually buy, which I think a lot of entrepreneurs don't really do quickly enough. They say, I'm going to spend a couple years building the product, and they haven't validated that someone's actually willing to pay for it. So long-winded way of basically giving my story, but brought me here.
That was beautiful. Really enjoyed that comprehensive response and so many elements of your journey to dig into. And I think we do definitely want to, in this interview, make sure that we get to your leadership style. And because, a huge thing for us is human-centric strategy. But before we get there, one element that I do want to tease out of the superhero origin story of Alex Capecelatro. And I'm curious, when you had this hard science background in government, you're working as a researcher, and when it came to discussing why it was that you wanted to become an entrepreneur, you mentioned it was hard to be able to talk about your ideas when you were in government. Where did this instinct, though, to commercialize, where did the instinct that you knew you needed to build a business, you knew you wanted to be an entrepreneur, where did that come from?
I think it came from two different things. The first one is when I look back, I think a lot of times adversity is a core driver for what helps us sort of find opportunity. And when I was young, I think I was around 11 or 12, I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And what's interesting about diabetes is, had I been born 70 years prior, it would have been an immediate life sentence. This would have been something that I couldn't have survived. But because of technology and because of entrepreneurs, I was able to take modern medicine at first through injection, then through the insulin pump, and subconsciously at that early age, I think I was realizing that you can actually really impact and enable people with innovation, and that always kind of stuck with me. And when I was working in national labs and research labs, again, I loved the work I was doing, but it felt too disconnected from actually helping people. And that's something that I think I've always been really fascinated with. The other thing is I got that early entrepreneurship bug from doing this BMX website. And as I mentioned, there's something really exciting when you're rolling out new product or new features and you've got an immediate consumer base and you've got that two-way feedback where you're validating your ideas. You're hearing people say, oh, it would be so cool if you did blah, blah, blah. And then you stay up all weekend, you don't get any sleep, and you build the thing that they thought would be cool. And you excite them, and then you see that it's not just them, it's thousands of other people that get excited about that as well. And that was what I did before I got into research. And so I think I just really missed that feedback. Like right now, we have almost daily conversations with our customer base about what do you wish the product could do? What would be, you know, the next edition that you would want? What would be a great new hardware product for us to work on? And then when we do it and we see their excitement, like that keeps me going.
I love that. It sounds like such a smart yet energy driving way to do user research and to continually improve your product in response to what the market demands. So,
Yeah.
you know, per Dan's point, we're really interested in leadership, and you know, we find that leadership styles tend to be impacted very much by our own stories. You've had such a tumultuous kind of up and down story in so many different environments, and you've often gone against the grain to build something that feels right to you. I'm just curious, could you tell us a little bit more about your leadership style and how your journey has impacted?
Yeah, so there are a lot of different areas to bring up. So I'll just hit on a couple of them. The first one that comes to mind is, I think I was very fortunate in how I was raised, where my parents were very hardworking. My dad was, how old is he? He was in his like mid to late 40s when I was born. And so as opposed to a lot of folks my age that have younger parents, my dad was of a different generation, and it was a generation where I grew up on the East Coast here in New York. If it's in February and it's 6:30 in the morning and it snowed at night, if I wasn't out there shoveling snow first thing in the morning, like my dad was never physically abusive, but I certainly would get, verbally abused. And I just kind of grew up with this attitude of like, you just work, you get it done, you don't complain. And I think when you're starting a company, there's a lot of that. There's a lot of, you just got to roll up your sleeves. You just got to get it done. But the thing is, by doing that, it allows you to be a good role model. And I would never ask an employee to do something that I wouldn't be willing to do myself. And so it kind of feeds into the second thing I think about is when I was young, I want to say probably around 13, maybe 14, I started working at this local apple orchard in town where I was living, and the apple orchard had a sort of a store where we would sell baked goods and different things, and I very quickly went from being the kid that would do the low level work and ultimately kind of work my way up to sort of being like a store manager before I ended up dropping out of high school to go work for the government. I've always kind of had a job. And in that time, one of the things I realized was there was always work that had to be done that was not glamorous or sexy. And I could motivate my team by basically saying, here are the 3 things that need to be done. There are 3 of us. I'll do whichever one you guys don't want to do. And always be willing to do sort of the shit job, if you will. And that worked. That allowed me to, make sure everything got done, make sure people, felt okay. It's sort of like if the only job to do is to clean the bathroom, someone might complain about that. But if one job's to clean the bathroom and the other job's to take out the trash, and you say, you do one, I'll do the one you don't want to do, well, they become almost happy to do, the one they end up doing because you gave them a choice and they know you're doing the worst one. And that kind of mindset has been part of my leadership style where, as CEO, I need to take on more high level tasks, but I also really try to do the stuff that no one else would want to do, so that the team gets to do the fun stuff as much as we can. The other thing that I've learned is I tend to be a workaholic. I think a lot of entrepreneurs are this way. You work through weekends, you work through holidays, and that can seem like a good thing until you do it for enough years that you realize it's actually turning off your employees. It makes them feel like they're not enough. It makes them feel like they either need to give up their weekends, or if they don't, that you're looking down on them. Even if you've never suggested that, it's sort of an implicit, almost implied emotion. And one thing that I've kind of learned the hard way is this really is a marathon. It's not a sprint. It takes years and years to develop, compelling solutions and businesses. And in addition to being good for yourself to take breaks, to take vacations, it's also good for the team. And so one of the things I started doing was just being a little bit more mindful of not over communicating after hours, even if I was working, just so I wouldn't set the tone of, well, why aren't you replying to emails at 2 a.m. like I am? Like that doesn't lead to long-term, sustained leadership. The other thing though is actually celebrating when you're going to be gone. So like I used to, if I were going to take a 3-day weekend, I would almost like try to keep it a secret of like, I was feeling guilty that I was taking off on a Friday. And now I think I'm more mindful of celebrating like, hey guys, I'm going to be out Friday. I'm going to go on a trip, for the weekend. So that I kind of encourage that it's okay for them to do the same. Because at the end of the day, as much as, part of me would love to have everyone working 7 days a week, 14, 15-hour days, that's not how you motivate people. It's not how you retain people. And, we're all human. So yes, I do believe startups take a lot of effort and, you do need to be able to sacrifice. Employees in general are never going to work as hard as you, and you shouldn't make them. That's not a bad thing. So just trying to be better about that. The other thing is I've not always been the best at both public like acknowledgements in the company, but also private criticisms. So what I mean by that is if someone does something not great, when you're a busy CEO and you have a lot going on, it's easy to just kind of say in front of everyone, like, hey, John, like you screwed up on this thing, and not realize that other people are listening and you're making them feel bad. And even though it takes more effort to find a way to pull them aside one-on-one, make sure that no one else is, aware, and to be a lot more empathetic about where they made a mistake. That's something that I've had to learn the hard way, because I am a bit of a machine, like here's a thing, get it done, move on. Like I don't want to spend a lot of time, on certain things, but you ultimately end up having people feeling bad if you, don't take that seriously. The flip side of that is at the same time, when someone does their job, my mindset is often, that's expected, move on. Like, that's, like, well, that's what we're all doing. But the reality is people need constant praise. And I don't mean necessarily, gold star for showing up type stuff, but I've tried to make it much more of a habit of really, we call them in the company shout outs, to do more shout outs when people do things that, are positive, even if it is in my mind expected for their job. And so examples are when we had this funding recently, I don't work with PR companies. Generally, I prefer to just do that internally. And so we had a guy in the company who is on the business development team lead the effort for press. And he did a great job. We got written up in lots of the press that we wanted. The story was, told the right way. And so I made it a point of just acknowledging him in front of the whole team with, hey, great job, Casey, really got us some great press. You handled that very well. And, that made his day. That made him feel good. And it seems simple. Like this seems like very basic stuff. But I look at the stories of people like Steve Jobs and Elon Musk, and I hear about, friends at other companies. And it's so rare that people do these basic things. And I think it's an easy thing. It doesn't cost you any money. The amount of time it takes is well worth the investment. And I think you need to invest in your people. You need to invest in the team. And so that's something that I've had to sort of learn over time. I've now been CEO of a tech company for over 10 years. I would say, the first 5 years, I didn't do this stuff nearly as well. And then just the other one is, I think we all understand that company culture is important, but I don't think we often understand what that means or how to really impact the company culture. And there are a lot of misnomers that company culture is free lunches and foosball tables, but really at the end of the day, that's not what culture is all about. And so we've made the mistake of hiring folks that are very technically capable of what the job needs, but they don't have the right culture fit. And for us, we wrote up what are our company values, which I think everyone, every entrepreneur should do. But one of our company values is being a team player and helping the team when the team needs help. And in our world, what that means is if someone's installing a system in a home and they're having issues, yes, we have a technical support line, but sometimes it gets down to engineering where there needs to be an engineering fix. We had some engineers in the early days that just thought, like, that's not my job. I'm not tech support. And that's not a culture fit for us. Those are the people that are no longer with us. The people that are with us and the people that we try to hire are the people who say, I'm going to empathize with, there's a need. I am equipped to help solve this problem. Let me help my team members out. And by creating, that value of teamwork, which again, like it seems basic, but in so many companies I've seen, it just doesn't happen. It's allowed us to really focus the funnel on who we hire, how we onboard them, how we introduce them to the company culture, company values. And so, I think for me, again, just sort of from the top, it's lead by example, work hard, but not to the point that it really turns people off. Give people the right amount of praise and try not to, do the opposite publicly, and really try to set a company culture where at the end of the day, I need to know that I could leave for a month if I had to, and things will still operate, as though I were there. Like that's always been my vision. And a lot of entrepreneurs, they're so micromanaging of so much that if they're not there, things don't happen the same way. And I think that's a sign of a bad culture. So those are a few things. I'm sure there are many more, but those are the first ones that come to mind.
Perfect. Yeah, no, great discussion of leadership and a lot of self-awareness on your part to see those things in yourself and your leadership style that you wanted to improve. And we're coming towards the end of our time together, Alex, but maybe I'll bring up one other theme, which is COVID. So, you've spoken about how you lead generally. Curious about how you led specifically in this time of COVID and how it's impacted your culture and company.
Yeah, so first thing was we were pretty quick to shut down the office, go to work from home, which was kind of surprising to me because I made that decision and I surprised myself because I tend to be the type of person that I don't love work from home. I think the company gets a lot of value out of that water cooler moment, face-to-face interaction, people being able to just, chat, how was your weekend type stuff, which is a lot harder to happen when you're remote. That being said, I think really showing the team that we value their health, their well-being, over profit is important. So we went, work from home right away. And in fact, I'm very much not a fan of what companies like Tesla are doing, where they're demanding their people come back to the point that they're suing the state of California. And I think, you can't, I don't think it's okay to put your employees at risk. Our attitude has been, if you want to come to the office, you're welcome to. We put out guidelines on kind of how to do it, but it's certainly not expected. And, we want people to be healthy and, and careful first. The other thing was we very quickly started doing, in addition to the regular company Zoom calls and weekly meetings and stuff to keep people bonded, we tried to do non-work related events. And so we did Friday afternoon happy hours for a while, which were really just meant to be hang out with the team, grab a drink, don't talk work. And that kind of moved into one of the employees set up a COVID bingo. We just did a birthday Zoom thing where we made it a challenge where we would show baby pictures from the 6 or 7 people in the company born in May, one at a time, and have people guess which person they think it is, which is actually a harder challenge than you would think. So that kind of stuff definitely goes a long way. Going back to the reason to have a business partner, in addition to being able to bounce things off each other, Tim surprised me one day. He's very much the kind of introvert CTO, and surprised me one day where he ordered snack packs delivered to every employee's home without even telling me. And that was awesome because it made the employees super happy. It really isn't that big of an expense. And I was so focused on other things, I didn't even think of that. And so that was a really great thing, which if you have employees working from home, consider that. It really does cheer them up. It's kind of a nice thing to do. But yeah, otherwise we had a record month in April. May is not yet done, but it's already on track to surpass April. And so we're fortunate to be in a business where things are still operating, things are moving forward. We're all working pretty hard and business is not down. So it's been good. We had a hiring freeze for a little bit, just not knowing what was going to go on. And then when we kind of saw how things were working out, we lifted that and we have a bunch of job openings and interviews and we're hiring. So we're lucky to be in a place where we're still growing.
It's great. It sounds like you did such a wonderful job managing a really challenging and uncertain situation. So Alex, as one question that we ask all of our interviewees at the end of our calls together, what are you doing for fun these days? Look, a lot of us are in lockdown. Our options are limited, but it's still very important to have a good time. What do you do for fun outside of work?
Yeah, I'm lucky to be in Southern California where weather's been great. I spent a lot of this time in Palm Springs. I'm now in Los Angeles, but in both places, I've been able to go hiking. What I tend to do is I start working usually around like 7:30 in terms of when things start to pick up. And so I've been going out at about 5:30 in the morning when it's still dark out and try to go for an hour hike, usually get to the top of the mountain as the sun's coming up, grab a great photo I post up on Instagram and, hike back down. So usually it's about 3 miles or so, an hour up and down, and I get to start work bright and early. But that physical exercise is so important. I definitely had some periods where I was a little down, a little just sort of in a funk, and I think just physical exercise is one of the big things for me to just keep things feeling upbeat.
That's beautiful. And not only is it physical exercise, but sounds like it's really beautiful too. Going into nature, seeing the sunrise. Wow, I'm a little jealous. In Brooklyn, we don't have as many options. Well, look, Alex, thank you so much for taking the time and opening up about your story. I think you have such an incredible journey, and I'm really excited to see what comes of your company. I think you're providing a really important product and service. So thank you.
Thanks. Appreciate it. Good to be here.
All right.